if you really want to influence change, you've got to influence behavior. So you've got to try and understand what are the 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5 behaviors, usually they're no more than a handful of behaviors, that are inhibiting change, and what changes do we need to see in those behaviors to bring about the change that we'd all like to see. And a great example of that was the picture you put up of Mahatma Gandhi. So we analyze more deeply what are these changes that go into creating a curious individual. The first thing we said is we've got to shift from yes to why. There's too much yesing in the classrooms, right? We give exams and we look for answers. Do we have exams that look for questions? That I will grade you based on the quality of question you write, as opposed to the answer? Well, maybe we don't need exams. Maybe we don't need to be so radical. But certainly there's a need to shift. In fact, I remember coming out of our campus one evening, seeing a government school teacher, and I asked him, hey, any impact of the Agastya program on your school? And he said, yes. I said, what is it? And he said, you know, after exposure to Agastya a few years ago, my children have never stopped asking questions. That was the impact he felt we'd had, right? So yes to why. The second is the shift from looking to observing. And there are numerous examples of this. You know, Feynman looks at the wobbling plate in Cornell. Everyone laughs when it falls down and breaks. And he asks the question, is there a mathematical relationship between spin and wobble? Because he saw the Cornell sign spinning at a different speed than the rim of the plate. Now, why didn't anyone else ask that question? Perhaps some people did observe it, but no one asked the question. Well, he asked the question, and he found a 2-to-1 relationship between wobble and spin, and then he said, but I can't find any use for it, so he failed on the application test. But years later, when he was studying the electron, the abstract notion of spin, he said his famous Feynman diagrams were derived from the wobbling plate, won a Nobel Prize. From a wobbling plate. Our great scientist C.V. Raman in India was standing on a ship looking at the Red Sea, and he asked the question, why is the sea blue? And everyone said, we know why the sea is blue because we know why the sky is blue. And the sea reflects the sky. And he said, no, something else is happening. And the cost of the equipment he used 100 years ago was no more than $5 to discover the Raman effect, for which he got a Nobel Prize, right? So looking, shifting from just looking to observing. The third is from being very passive to learning to explore. That's more obvious. You don't explore, you don't find out. Can you get bitten? Yeah. Nothing ventured, nothing gained, though. So you've got to check out what's happening out there and leave your prejudices behind. The fourth is to shift from being very textbook bound. Textbooks are important, don't get me wrong. We all need to read, we need to refer to books and all the rest of it, but it can't become an obsession. Shift from textbook bound to being more hands-on. And finally, the most important shift is from fear to confidence, right, which is behavioral. Now, there's no point telling someone, be more confident, Gina. It'll make you less confident. So there's no point telling people, be more confident. You've got to engage them in different ways that the confidence springs from within without you're even noticing it, right? So hopefully if you did all of these experiential hands-on projects and all the rest of it, children begin to become more confident. So some years ago, I decided to visit a village school to find out, again, what impact, if any, we were having, and I do that all the time, and each time I visit a village, during the day or at night, it's a revelation. And on the way to the village, I spotted a little ragged-looking farm boy walking along the road. So out of curiosity, from my car, I stopped and asked him, hey, have you heard of Agastya? And I was pleasantly surprised when he said, yes, I've been to your campus once. Now that was great, but also disappointing. He'd just been to our campus once. What could he learn there? So I asked him, did you learn anything? Expecting him to say no. And then I'd have to justify Agastya to all these investors and everybody else. And he said, yes. So I said, what did you learn? He said, sir, I know how to measure the area of a leaf. Right? Now, being a non-scientist, with no clue about how to measure the area of a leaf, I was impressed. And I grew up around trees. I literally lived in them in Rishi Valley. Never thought about measuring the area of a leaf. So I asked him, how would you do that? And he said, very simple. Just place it on a piece of graph paper, draw the outline, count the number of little boxes, and they've given me the area of each box, and I just multiply the number of boxes with its area, and I get a pretty good idea. Brilliant. I was thrilled. And I thought, gosh, this is mind-blowing, and this is a little farm boy. So I continued on my journey and went to a village school. It was hot and dusty, and I was a bit thirsty that day, I remember, and a bit irritated, looking at my watch, need to get back to Bangalore. So rather hurriedly, I asked the teacher, what impact has Agastya had? And she said, well, the children seem to be more motivated. They love visiting your campus. Actually, many of them have started attending school in the hope that if they come to school, they can get to see your campus. And the unit test scores are improving and so on, which was all very heartening to hear. And then I said, can I speak to some students? And she pointed me to a tall girl, Uma, at least tall by my standards, right? So I went up to Uma and asked her, Uma, I'm from Agastya. They say you're a class leader. Congratulations. What impact have we had? And I thought she'd say I'm doing very well in math, physics, chemistry, biology, and all the rest of it. But she didn't. You know what she said? She said, sir, I'm not afraid to speak anymore. Now, that really gladdened my heart. I'm not sure I had even that awareness at her age to even make a statement like that, because that requires a bit of self-awareness to say that. Perhaps what we are really encouraging is not just education, but transformation. Transformation of one's self-esteem, of one's self-belief. And that's what Gandhi stood for. You know, there are stories of how he'd visit a village, and obviously he had no time to hang out there. He was moving from village to village, leading a movement, and he'd spot somebody standing under a tree and go up to the kid and say, hey, you look like a really smart fellow. I think you can be a great leader. Keep it up. And the guy grows up to be a great educator. This is a true story, and he says, it was that 1 second with Mahatma Gandhi that transformed my life. So this seemed like an experience, you know, that made me think about how transformation can be achieved sometimes without too much money or too much infrastructure or too many interventions. It's just the thing that happens at the right place at the right time. Anyway, Uma ended up being the first girl from her village to join an engineering college. She did rather well at school, and her example inspired many of her friends to follow suit, get into college. And we have a scholarship program where we encourage these kids to join college. So what are some of the insights that you can take from this? The first one is, and it should be obvious to you, and most of you are top-level educators, but certainly a discovery to me, is you want to catch them young. Because as we all know, education is easier than re-education, right? And this is important because even as policymakers or as business people, suddenly, and India produces 15 million, 20 million people who enter the workforce every year. And a lot of people in industry complain that we have to retrain all these students. They just haven't got the sorts of skills we're looking for, the sorts of attitudes we're looking for. And that retraining becomes more difficult, it costs a lot of money, creates a lot of heartache, and before you know it, you have a whole backlog of people. And you're wondering, how the hell are we going to do it? And it's not just a problem in India. Even the most advanced country in the world, the US, has this problem. Every time there's a new change or new ways of doing business, you've got to retrain people. So how much easier it would be if they came in with the right sorts of attitudes, with relatively malleable minds, with the spirit of curiosity. So that is critical. The second is that in this day and age when people are bombarded by information, and everyone knows a lot more. There are studies that say that the IQ scores in the US have been going up steadily over the last 20, 30 years. But the CQ scores, as measured by the Torrance test, the creativity quotient has actually gone down, right? So, and part of the reason could be distractions, too much information, and all the rest of it. So, creative learning may be a luxury or an option for the rich and well-off, but it's absolutely essential for the poor. And it's essential because a lot of underprivileged children and communities around the world face huge problems. So they have to come up with creative, innovative approaches. So solutions have to grow organically from the village or from the community. And for that, you need people from that milieu to originate the ideas and the breakthroughs. So creative learning, sparking curiosity is absolutely essential for the most deprived. The third, as I hope to illustrate through Uma's example, the shift from fear to confidence. And good news is that transformation is not that difficult. I'm going back to reinventing my intellectual life, actually, because when I was a student at Rishi Valley, these are exactly the sorts of things that Krishnamurti used to talk about in his annual lectures. He would say, you don't have to be Edison to turn on the light. It can happen. But for it to happen, you must want it to happen, and you can't approach it with bias. And you have to be aware of that. And what I'm finding actually is, yes, transformation is not that difficult. It's possible. Even a couple of interactions can make it happen. But to make it happen at scale, we have to create environments, stimulating environments, where children, teachers, community members, it's very important, the engagement of parents. We have night mobile lab visits where we engage with parents, grandparents, and all the rest of them in villages, where all of them can come together and explore without a sense of fear, where they can experiment, where they can be curious, which leads me to my vision for Agastya Foundation, and I think a useful vision for societies in general to think about is to create a nation of curious people. Rather than say, I want to be a global superpower, that's like saying be confident, right? And then be frozen in paralysis. Now, how do I become a superpower? Or that 9% a year growth means the end-all and be-all of anything. That's not a vision, that's just a metric. If you say, let's create curious communities, then the rest over time will fall into place. You will produce the products and innovations and the breakthroughs and all the rest of it. And that might well lead you to become a superpower, or you may not even be interested if you're truly curious in being a superpower, right? So that seems like a more useful thing to do. And when I say curiosity, half the story is what I've talked about with you today, which is curiosity in terms of the external world. But there is another very important element to curiosity, and that's curiosity into the interior. The science of the interior is as interesting, subtle, complex as the science of the exterior. India in particular has a very good track record in this. It's called in Sanskrit Adhyatma Vidya, right? And I'm afraid to some extent countries like India, where there's this mad rush to become a superpower or embrace everything that's been done in the West or anywhere else, a blind copying sort of culture, is not the answer if you want to create an innovative, fundamentally original and creative society. You've got to combine curiosity into the external world with curiosity into your own psyche, into your own self. If you did that, the fusion of that, then I think you're creating what I call a revolutionary mind. Now, is this possible? It may be possible, it may not be possible, but it's worth striving for, I think. What are the learnings from this that I can share with you? Big ideas attract big people. I think the very fact that I've been invited to come here and give a talk is probably an example of that. The original idea of building a school for creative leaders morphed into building a system or an approach to sparking curiosity and creativity at a mass level. The analogy I like to use is, we decided early on that raising the level of the ocean, even by a millimeter, might be more meaningful for us than filling a bucket. In the process, we began to attract a lot of policymakers from government. Chief Secretary of Karnataka is a big supporter of what we're doing. People from Delhi and other parts of India. Dr. Abdul Kalam, who's perhaps one of India's most popular presidents ever, has a project with us to do mobile labs in Bihar. And we run 3 mobile science labs now. Actually, he called me about 2 months ago. I was on a flight to Mumbai in the bus, and I had a missed call from Dr. Abdul Kalam. So I wasn't sure if I should call back because I'm in a bus, and I get into the plane, and then I have to interrupt his call and say, sorry, I'll have to call you back. Or should I call back in a couple of hours, in which case his office might think, who does this guy think he is? Taking 2 hours to return a call from the President of India. So I just took the risk and called him back, and he came online, and he said, how are you doing? I said, great. How's the mobile lab in Bihar? It's just one teeny-weeny mobile lab. Why should he bother about it, right? I said, it's doing excellent. We're all very happy. He said, I just called to tell you that I've won a humanitarian award for my contributions to science and technology. And I thought, well, that's the least they could do for him. So I said, congratulations, sir. And he said, but that's not the reason why I called you, for God's sake. The reason I called you is to tell you that I'm giving you the money. I said, oh, thank you. What do you want me to do with it? He said, that mobile lab program in Bihar? Just expand it. Make sure that the poorest children in the most remote areas of Bihar have access to that mobile lab. So big ideas sometimes attract big people. The second is, inspire people through a unique mission or through your mission. So what is your mission? Do you have a mission? For myself, I believe a mission without romance and adventure is like a beautiful flower without fragrance. So a mission should be exciting, and it's got to really turn you on. You want to jump out of bed every morning to do it, whatever it is. The third is go where no one's gone before, because going where everyone else has gone is, at least I think, terribly boring, right? So we could have started our center in Bangalore, which is the center of intellectual capital in many areas in India. Instead, we went to the middle of nowhere and built this campus. And this campus today has become a magnet for intellectual capital from around the world. Children from lots of good schools in India and overseas visit our campus and pay us for the privilege of experiencing it. The next point is hire people with a BEE degree. Do you have a BEE degree? It's not Bachelor of Electrical Engineering or Ecology and Environment, all terribly important degrees. BEE stands for Bachelor of Energy and Enthusiasm. Okay? Now, the kind of work we do, mobile labs, going out in the heat and dust 6 days a week, attracts a certain kind of individual, a person that's bursting with energy and enthusiasm, because it's pretty tough. And the greatest example of BEE in the Indian context was the picture that you put up of Mahatma Gandhi, a 70-plus-year-old man walking very purposefully, bursting with energy, enthusiasm, and yes, if it's possible, passion that comes over time. So hire people with a BEE degree. The next learning is, don't get too hung up, and I'm sorry if I say this in this forum, on outcomes. Right? Outcomes are important because you want to measure what's happening and what's the result of it and all the rest of it. But I think the process is as important, if not more important. And it's certainly a lot more fun. And often the outcome that you aimed for is not the outcome that actually happened, and sometimes the outcome that happened turns out to be more important than the outcome that you thought you were looking for. Like some people come to us and say, are you producing more scientists? Maybe you should focus on that. More children getting into science, and that's a very important outcome. But the other day, the head of IBM's marketing in India walked into one of our